Hello and welcome to this episode of CatSci podcast. Cats are often thought of as homebodies, and just like people, many cats do prefer to stay in the comfort of their own home. Yet, sometimes a cat has to leave their home. And what do you do if you suddenly accept a job across the country? These opportunities are really exciting, but they can also be really stressful, and sometimes people feel they have to give up their cat if they don't think it's possible to move them. So, this episode, we're going to explore whether or not it's actually possible to fly on a plane with a cat. Think back to the last time you were at the airport. Did you see a dog in a carrier or on a leash? It's not really that uncommon to see dogs flying with their owners. But when was the last time you saw a cat at the airport? At the end of February, Tori and her cat Elliot flew 5 hours from Wisconsin to Montana for a cat training demo. Elliot did a really amazing job on his trip and demonstrated that it is possible to navigate air travel with cats. Today, we are going to talk about their experience and see how you can better prepare your cat for air travel if you need to. Before we get into what this long distance travel with cats might look like, Tori, I'd love if you could just talk about some of the ways you got your cats initially used to leaving the home.
What I like to start with is getting them used to their carrier first and foremost. If they're not used to their carrier, that is a huge one because a lot of times they're just scared of the carrier in general, and that gets them predisposed to already having anxiety when they get out of the house. So I start with getting them really comfortable with it. I know we talked about in the last episode how to get them used to their carriers. So that's a big one. Also, getting used to being on a harness and leash, because if they're going to get exercise at your destination and they can't be off leash, it's great for them to get used to that. So those are two of the main things that I want cats to know before I even consider bringing them outside of the home. Also, as an emergency precaution, I always like to have a good recall or name recognition on my cat so that they come back to me if they were to slip their leash or if they were to get out of the carrier and things like that.
So, with name recall, is that something that your cats just over time they learned their name, or did you actually specifically train them to come back to their name?
I specifically train them to respond to their name and also respond to coming when called. So with their name, I wait for them to get a little bit distracted, or if your cat is really into you, you can toss a treat on the ground. They eat the treat, you say their name, they look at you, you praise or click, and then toss them another treat to reset it. So it's kind of this feedback loop of they know that they're going to get a treat, so they're already predisposed to looking back at you, and they know that something good is going to come when they look at you. So that's what I call the name game. Then there's calling them to come. So I will toss a treat out, I'll back up a couple steps, and then I'll say, let's say Peach here, which hopefully she doesn't come crashing into the door because she does have a good recall. She's on the other side of the door. So I'll say their name very clearly, and then I'll use a single cue such as come or here. I don't like things like come on or come here, because you can kind of feel that breaking off and kind of just fading out. And if I'm calling my cat outside, I want something very sharp and prompt for them to hear as a kind of an upbeat tone that they want to come to. So I know in dog training, you hear a lot of fluffy come, and nobody wants to come to that. Sounds like a growl. Sounds like you're mad at them. So make it upbeat, make it clear, make it concise. So Peach here is my tone. It kind of has an uptick to it. And I start that, like I said, by toss a treat out, go a couple steps away, call them to come, give them a few treats for when they come to you, and then toss another one out, and then do the same process again. And as they're getting used to that, you can increase the distance from where they are when you call them, or you can start doing it without tossing a treat. You can just call them to come when they understand what they're doing.
Yeah, that's great advice. And what you just talked about with that idea of having a command that ends on an uptick, that's similar to something that a group of scientists in Sweden were looking at with cats. And so they were looking at the pitch of cat vocalizations and found that when cats had positive mental states, such as when they were seeking attention from a person, their meows were short, they were high pitched, and they had a rising tone. So, like, but then when cats had negative mental states, like when they were stressed in the carrier, they often had meows that were longer, lower pitched, and had falling tone, like meow. So, just exactly like what you're talking about here, it makes sense to end your cues for your cats on a rising tone to make it more of an affiliative, positive communication tool. So, it makes sense to have your communication mirror the kind of communication that cats have with us. So, science is really supporting exactly the kind of thing that you're saying.
I love when that happens. That's
Yeah,
always great. I totally,
absolutely.
totally knew that before, right?
Yeah, and to add to what else you were talking about with the name recognition, there was a study by a research group out of Japan, and they were looking at whether cats can discriminate their name from other words. So there wasn't any kind of specific training like you're talking about, but just whether these cats are already recognizing their names inside of homes. And so they did this by selecting four nouns that were the same length as the cat's name, and then said these nouns one by one in the same accent as they would typically say the cat's name. And then finally, they're going to say the cat's name. So if I wanted to test this with my cat Carl, I would basically say garden, insect, flower, summer, Carl. And so the basic idea here is you're going to say these four random nouns. And probably after each time you say one of these nouns, the cat's going to pay less and less attention to you since those words just have no meaning to them. But after your cat hears a word they do recognize, their name, the cat's probably more likely to suddenly perk up and look at you and maybe even come to you. So you might want to try something similar with your own cat just for fun. But if you're going on a long trip with your cat, then it's especially important for them to have good name recognition skills and have the ability to come when called. So, what other kinds of things did you do? So, once your cats were pretty readily responding to their name and coming to you, is that when you started taking them outside the house? Now they've been, carrier trained on their harness and leash. What did you do next?
Sure. So I start doing these field trips. So the beginning field trips could be you go in your carrier, we will do a lap around the house, we come back, I put you down. The next step of field trips are we go out to the car in the carrier and we might just sit in the car for a few minutes. I'll respond to an email or something and we go back in the house. Then it might be I take them for takeout. So call up the pizza place or whatever, put them in the carrier, put them in the car, go get my pizza, come back, take them out and let them get out again. And the idea is, and I'll do these, I'll do the walk around the house first, and I'll do the go to the car and come back in the house a few times before I take a trip to the pizza place or whatever. And I do this so that they realize that the carrier doesn't always lead to the scary vet. So, pretty quick trip around the house, pretty quick trip to the car and back, fairly quick trip to the pizza place, and then I start branching out. Once they're comfortable with takeout, then I bring them to pet stores, then I bring them to a park and let them walk around.
Yeah, I love that. I think what we see with pet owners a lot is that they get really excited about doing something. and they just want to go do it. So let's just, on the first time out, go take the cat to Petco or PetSmart and see what happens. But the idea that you're presenting, it's basically shaping, or this idea that we're going to have the cat become comfortable over small increments. So at first, we're just going to get out of the house for a little bit, then a little longer, and then a bigger trip, and then, slowly progressing. And I think that is almost always the best way of getting an animal used to something, is just showing them for a little bit what it's going to be like, then ending on a good note. Karen Pryor always talks about this idea of ending on a positive note. And that's something you always want to make sure you do. If you take your cat out for an hour the first time, it's likely within the first 10 minutes that they're probably going to be totally over it. So really end it, few minutes. That's all you need. Give them a big reward, a jackpot once you're done, and then next day a little longer. So definitely that's the best way to do it.
Yep, and they habituate to the situations a bit more. It's also beneficial, especially if your cat is afraid of the vet, to bring them to the lobby of the vet and just sit there for a few seconds and then bring them home and then gradually increase some distance there or duration there. Um, and I also, what I love to do is, since I have the three, when somebody has a vet appointment, almost always another one of my cats is going, and so one has a wellness check, the other one comes for the ride. Nothing's happening to them. They get to just walk around and sniff the room and interact with the vet and the techs and everything like that. But nothing bad is happening. And I do that frequently.
Mhm.
I'm always at the vet because they're always doing something stupid to themselves.
Yeah, I love that. I've never thought of bringing one of the cats with me just to get used to the vet. So that's a really great idea. I love that. And your vet doesn't mind that happening?
They're all used to seeing multiple at certain times. And what tends to happen too is, like I said, they're lately have been getting into really like dumb things. Like Violet jumped off of her cat tree and landed wrong and sprained her front foot. And so when she went, I brought Elliot, also because he's the best at the vet and that gives her some confidence. So bring Elliot to, but then a couple weeks later, Peach got an ear infection. So then Peach is going and Violet is going too for the recheck. So nothing's really happening for the recheck except for just feeling her leg. So that happened. Then Violet and Elliot were playing and Elliot scratched Violet's eye. And so then Violet had to go back to the vet, but Peach had the recheck. So it's also been that situation going on lately. And then Elliot had to go for his health check for traveling. So it's just been this like constant rotating flow of cats.
I love that too, the idea about one cat being more confident in the room and the other cat being able to kind of reference that. That's something I've seen in our kitten classes that we do. That sometimes we'll have like another cat that was a graduate of the class come back to a new class, and they're, of course, going to be more confident and relaxed in the room. And I think that helps the new kittens, like, oh, I'm going to maybe model some of this behavior that I'm seeing. So that's a great idea. If you have one cat that does especially well, let them show the other cat how it's done.
Absolutely. After Peach got spayed, she became afraid of the vet. So I had Peach there for her ear infection the one time, and Elliot was there for a health check for our flight. And they took both of their baselines of their heart rate and their respiratory rate. And Peach's heart rate, I believe, was 200, and her respiratory rate was somewhere in the mid 140s, 150s, which was like like basically like hyperventilating for Peach. And then they took Elliot's baseline, and his heart rate was like 120 and his respiratory rate was 40. So they were like, oh, he's really calm. And so having him there, I think, does really help her too.
So, is that one of the reasons you chose Elliot to do this trip with you, to fly on the airplane? Were you pretty confident that he would do the best out of the cats?
Yeah, and it's funny because if I were going solely off of who's the best at tricks, I wouldn't have picked him. But what it comes down to is confidence, because that's a big deal for him, from being in the house to going, we had to go to the airport and then get on a flight and then connect in Denver and then get on another flight and then get to Montana and then spend a week with 7 dogs in my friend's house and a parrot. And we did show him to her chickens, but neither were interested in each other. But so it was a huge project. And Elliot is kind of unflappable. He's very confident, very bold. And so I chose him because I knew that he would be the easiest to habituate and to train for this, because I had about a month to do this, to train him specifically for the flight and the trip.
So, what went into that training for this trip once you knew it was happening? Was there anything else that you did to prepare him for it?
Oh, yeah. Every day I did a few different things. So his normal carrier that he likes, and goes to the vet in, is not the one that I could bring on the plane because they were smaller flights. We were flying out of the airport in Madison, which is small, and getting to the airport in Helena, Montana, which is small. And so the planes are those little ones, and he had to fit under the seat. And so I had this hot pink, like, squishy carrier, which I felt bad that he had a ride in, but it turned out um, working out just fine. But I got him used to that carrier. We did crate games every day with that. And by the last day, I put the carrier out the night before, and he slept in it for about an hour and a half on the floor rather than sleeping in a cat tree or somewhere else that he really likes to sleep in. So I had been successful with that he really was interested in relaxing and sleeping and being calm in that carrier before we left. So that was one piece. The next piece was getting him used to all of the sounds that he was going to hear, because I knew that that was probably going to be one of the most scariest parts of this whole trip, was the airport noises, the commercial toilet flushing noises, because they're much louder than the household ones, hand dryers, kids screaming. I even looked up a college lecture hall and had just people talking, like a group of people. And we did this sort of a sound desensitization protocol with him, although he wasn't worried about the sounds at home at all, really. So we put it on surround sound with our sound bar on the TV using YouTube. And there's tons of airport noise videos and like wacky videos that I found on YouTube. Thankfully, people do videotape these things because they were super helpful. But I would put the video on and then we'd just play with a wand toy for about 15 minutes. And then I also kept airport noises on as kind of white noise during the day, and he would just sleep on his tree. He would walk around the house. I did it while he was eating food, and he was just able to do his normal cat duties while he heard all of these different noises. So that I feel like really helped him in this situation.
So, we know that scent can have a big impact on cat behavior, but did you include anything on your trip that smelled like home? So, having a blanket that Elliot typically sleeps on, did you put something like that in his carrier with him?
So I brought blankets with me. I had been letting him lay on a few different blankets, and I put them in my luggage and I brought them. I didn't put them in his carrier when we were traveling because I didn't want him to get too hot under the seat, but I did bring a Doc and Phoebe's Noble puzzle toy so that he could eat and do puzzle toy things while he was under the seat.
Did he do that at all? Did he eat on the plane?
He did eat some on the plane. Some moments were a bit too stressful, so he didn't eat in the airport. He was
Mhm.
more interested in exploring there and hanging out with the people. Um, in fact, a testament to our training was we got to the Madison airport and I let him out of the carrier on his harness and leash, and he was walking up to other people waiting at the gate, and he was rolling on his back, and he was trying to get pets, and he was tail up, aloe rubbing on them. And so that really, really made me feel better about him being there too.
Oh, that is so great. I think that would just shock people. I'm sure people were shocked seeing that at the airport. Like, what is this cat doing here? You don't expect that. And I took my 2 cats on a plane, same kind of deal. I did them under the seat. My friend came out with me. She put 1 cat under her seat. I put 1 cat under mine. And they didn't make a peep the whole time. I was really worried they were just going to cry and cry the whole time, but they were really good. But I did not do the same kind of prep with them that you did with the Elliot, and so I could tell that they were, like, pretty freaked out, and they didn't eat at all that whole time. I tried to give them water during the layover. They had no interest in eating or drinking and didn't wanna come out of the carriers either, so I think definitely if I ever have to move again or travel long distance, I think all those things you're saying are just amazing tips. Again, just slowly work up to these things and don't just kind of flood them with all this stuff all at once.
In the airport, I had a United employee come up, and she was there was a few people that were all over him, which was a little overwhelming to him, especially in the Denver airport, which is huge. But he took it with stride. He walked around. The people were commenting, "Oh my god, I've never seen a cat on a leash. Oh my god, I've never seen a cat in an airport. Oh my god, he's doing so well. Wow, he walks on leash. What else does he know?" And it was a great educational opportunity for people in the airport. So be ready for that. If you do travel with your cat, you're going to have people all over you. In the airport, it was super funny because I brought him through. I should have looked this up, but I didn't. I was too busy training. But I was like, I wonder how security is gonna work. I had known from before with traveling with my childhood dog who came with us, that they would just go through the metal detector with the humans, but I didn't know if he was going to be allowed to wear a harness or not. And so what ended up happening is they gave me the choice of going in a private room and letting him loose in there, at least so it wouldn't be as stressful, or they gave me the option to just take him out of the carrier and hold him as I went through the metal detector. And I was like, well, he'll be fine. I feel like he'll be fine. So he came out of his carrier. I had him on his harness and leash, and I just carried him through the metal detector, and he did well. He didn't squirm. He was just fine. Looked around at the people. Everyone was shocked around me. In fact, the TSA agent said, I would have been a bloody mess by now. And I was like, yeah, well, it helps to be a cat trainer.
Absolutely, yeah. Yeah, I had it similar where I'd mentioned my friends helped me fly the 2 cats over. Shout out to Renee Volchko if you're listening to this. Thanks again. But when we were going through security, the guy wanted each of us to carry one of the cats through. And I didn't, not that I don't trust, my friend or anything, but my one cat, Macy, is blind. And my other cat, Cecilia, she was very particular. She liked her particular people. And so hadn't ever been held by Renee or many other people besides me and my husband. So I was like, well, can't I just walk both of them through one at a time? And the security, was giving me a little bit of a stink about that, but eventually they let me do it. But they made a similar comment about, oh, I'm surprised you're not all scratched up. There's a trust between you and your cat a lot of the time, and I trusted my cats. Now, that's part of the reason I wanted to carry them through, though, because I know they trust me. So, definitely things to consider, having that trust there built up before you try to do something like this. So, We also had a long flight and we had a layover, but I didn't have a litter box with me or anything, and they have pet relief areas, but my cats were already afraid enough, so I just kind of figured, well, if they need to go, there's like a piddle pad in there they could go on. But is that how you handled it? Like, did he ever go on his own somewhere else, or did you just have like a pad in there for him?
So I used my experience of doing our road trips because, as you may have heard in other podcasts or other media from Space Cat Academy, that we do travel from Wisconsin to New Jersey with each of our animals, and we do stop and give them breaks to go potty because it's a like 14-hour drive, and they never go. They're never comfortable enough, and we put it right on the seat with them. We lock all the doors, lock all the windows, and let them, just walk around the car for about 15 minutes so they have an opportunity to kind of acclimate and then try to potty. And I do encourage that if you can. I didn't really see an opportunity to do that in the airport, and I knew, though I don't like them to hold it for that long, I knew that he could. So made him go before we left. It sounds like I'm a parent telling a kid to go do it. But and the way I do that is, my cats, especially Elliot, is very into the litter box. And when you scoop the litter box, they're always watching and they always want to get in there the second that it gets cleaned, because that's super cool that it's pristine, nice and clean, so I waited until that morning that we were leaving, and I scooped the litter box and he went in and did a nice long pee, and I was like, okay, now I know 6 a.m. was the last time you peed. And I was ready to clean it. I had a bunch of paper towels. I would say, if you don't have the experience of knowing how long your cat can hold it in between, I would definitely put a pee pad in there and just be ready to switch it out with another pee pad. He did not have an accident, and when he had the opportunity to go into his litter box when we got to our destination, he did use it then, though.
Yeah. Wow, that is so smart. I've never thought about doing that, but it's so true with my boys as well. Like, the moment I've got that scoop and I'm scooping out, it's like, what's going on? I need to get in there now and put something back to make a deposit. So that's just a great way to consider things anyway. Like, if you need a behavior to occur and you know it occurs during certain circumstances, use that to your advantage. Think ahead like that. Always be thinking ahead of your animal. So really, I applaud that. Excellent job thinking of doing that. And I'm gonna try that next time they have to go to the vet or something. Just go now. You're not gonna have another chance. So now you've gone on this big trip, you're at your friend's house. What's kind of the next thing you did with Elliot when you're there?
So the friend that I was meeting is Molly Sumridge, and she's awesome, by the way. So shout out to her. Um, she's a professor of anthrozoology at Carroll College, and so she's all animal savvy. I'm animal savvy. So I walked in. He had his own room, which was lovely. We stayed in their guest bedroom, and he had his litter box all set up for him and some toys around, and he really enjoyed Montana Cat TV, because the best part about traveling is there's different things to look at out the window. In Wisconsin, there's some birds and trees and, people walking around in our specific area. And in Montana, he got to see prairie dogs and my friend's dogs and different things like that. So he got a whole new set of things to look at. So he kept himself pretty busy with that for the first couple hours that we were there. And he got settled. He sniffed the whole room out, used the litter box. And so he had his own space to feel safe in for the entire week.
Very cool. So the whole point of going was to do some demos or some teaching opportunities, right? So what did Elliot do for that?
So I was a guest lecturer and Elliot was my demo cat. He was a bit overwhelmed by the amount of people. He had never seen 20 to 40 people before in one room. So it took a little bit. The first day, he got to hang out in the room and just see all the students, and he oscillated between walking around the room and seeing people and then hunkering down in his carrier because it was a little overwhelming. We did a lot of look at the people, get treats, look at the people, get treats, and he knew that the carrier was a safe place. So we gave a lecture called Cats Herding or Training, which dispelled 3 myths that are common in cat ownership, and that was that cats are not affectionate, that they are low-maintenance pets, and that they can't be trained. And so we went over some of the training elements to that. We went over cat behavior and some of the preconceived notions that people had of cats. And we actually went over the cat preference test that you wrote, Kristen.
Awesome. Love seeing it applied.
So I had them read the study, and then we discussed that as well. And so then in the labs, we talked about how I got to Montana and the training, like we were talking about before in this podcast, the training that went into getting him there. And then they got to work with Elliot, who was a little bit reluctant in one of the labs, and then kind of played and worked with them in the second. But he also shut down the computer on me, and we had to reboot the computer. And then he turned the projector off. And then in another lecture, he made this massive shush emoji come up, and it was like, shh. And I was like, oh, geez. And then he turned on a 5-minute timer. So in no way, shape, or form do I have a little cat robot that does everything I ask. He's his own man, and he does whatever he wants. But he did really well, and he showed people that cats can do stuff. They can fly from Wisconsin to Montana. They can, turn a computer off now. So they can do all sorts of things.
Yeah, that's really amazing. I think that's great for so many people. I mean, great for you as a trainer to really hone your skills and apply these things. Great for him to get that experience. And then just great for the students and people in the airport to see, oh my gosh, this stuff can be done. I love it. I think that's absolutely great. So I really hope all of these things you've said help people feel like even if their cats may be not super outgoing, that they can at least get them used to the carrier. Like you said, the carrier should be a safe space. If the carrier is a space of anxiety, you've done something wrong, because when you then go to the vet or you go to the airport, they're not going to feel safe in that already off the bat. And it's really important that they have just an area of security that, especially in a novel, unfamiliar place, that they feel they can retreat to.
So in this episode, I've showed you that it is possible to do the unthinkable with cats. Do keep in mind that cats have different personalities, and the amount of time that you'll need to spend preparing varies between cats. Elliot is pretty bold, and we had the time constraint of a month, but I did work basically every single day in that month to get him prepared for this. So keep your timeline in mind, keep your specific cat's personality in mind, and keep your goals in mind for your cat when you're deciding whether or not to put them in boarding or to bring them on a trip with you. Let us know if you've traveled with your cats before, or if you plan to travel with your cats. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you in the next episode. This episode was brought to you by meows Cat Behavior and Space Cat Academy. Visit us online at meows.com and spacecatacademy.com.